Hey, everybody, episode 44 with the Church Digital podcast. And I got to tell you, I am looking forward to this episode. I love this guy we're bringing back in, Jate Earhart. You may remember him way back from episode 13 here at the Church Digital podcast. He leads a video game ministry, a discipleship ministry. He disciples video gamers, millennials, Generation Z. He disciples these guys towards leading others to Christ in evangelism and discipleship. He's creating disciple makers using an online platform called Discord, which is a video game. He's leading a video game discipleship ministry. How crazy is that? And he's been very effective. And he's doing some really interesting things. But I tell you, the thing that just happened that I heard he was doing, I was like, I really got to unpack this. He's actually in the process through his church, who does a lot of church planting. He's in the process of being part of a cohort for church planners. He's looking at turning his Love Clan, his online ministry, not into just a discipleship ministry, but into a fully functioning church. And if you've listened to the last podcast, and what you'll hear in this podcast is Jate is overly concerned. Overly is maybe not the right word, but he's very concerned when it comes to the ecclesiology of what a church is and the standard that he is holding into place for his potentially future digital church, and how he is exploring and holding himself and the others around him to the standard to allow for this Love Clan, this online ministry, to one day become a fully functioning digital church. And that's an exciting thing. I love this conversation, and I love where Jate's heart and his passion is. So here you go. I'm bringing in Jate Earhart into the conversation. Of course, Jate's with Love Clan, and myself, Jeff, with the Church Digital, in a conversation that I'm calling Planting a Digital Church. Hey, everybody, here you go. Did you just roll out of bed?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Way to go. I mean, my kid was jumping on top of me at 6:30, but good for you, man.
Yeah. I stayed up a little later. I was playing Beat Saber and stuff. So that's why my hair is all crazy, because I was sweating like crazy before I went to bed.
I just got it's Quest, right?
Yeah.
Oculus Quest. I got that for Christmas. It's really
yeah.
Like I'm really enjoying kind of getting exposed to a little bit of this. I'll tell you the story. I was alone in my house. My family had gone away for after Christmas, that had gone up to the in-laws up in West Palm Beach just for a night. And so it's like midnight, 1 a.m. and I've got Oculus Quest on, and I'm literally all by myself, and I'm playing the Star Wars game. The Star Wars came with it, and so
cool.
Yeah, I'm in this thing where, and I'm showing my Star Wars naivete right here. I can't think of the name of the
I'm worse
the
than
big
you are.
giant 50-foot thing. It starts with an R. Anyway, I'm kind of chasing after this 50-foot monster to try to figure out, and it's like clawing and tearing apart all the environments. And I've got the headsets on where I can't see anything, but I'm supposedly walking around in the safe space. What I didn't realize is the dog was in the middle of the safe space. My dog had laid down.
Yeah.
And so it was literally right by my feet as this Rancor is what it's called. And the Rancor is like tearing apart the thing.
Yeah.
And right when the Rancor trashes, like right where I am with these big, long, thick nails, the dog stands up and jabs its nails into my feet.
Yeah.
Exact timing. Scared the garbage out of me. My arms go flailing. And what I didn't realize was I was 6 inches away from the Christmas tree when my arms went flailing. And ornaments are like scattered all over the place. And I haven't told my wife yet, who's not listening to this, but I broke a couple. She doesn't know about that.
No.
Don't tell. And it was so funny. It's like, man, that's VR, man. It just sucks you in.
Everybody has some kind of story like that. Luckily, you like spared your TV or whatever. Because most people, it's like, I forgot that my TV was in the space, and like, for me, I was using I was playing I think I was playing like a Pong game or something, and those straps that it came with were like not that great, and like I let go of it, and it like snapped the strap. And it bounced like hit a wall, and then it like smashed into a lamp, and it just like shattered the bulb, and there's like glass everywhere, and it was just like there's like
That's
a
awesome.
my roommate's like, what the heck happened? So I actually got to meet the guys that like made the Vive. This is the one I have.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck happened with the little strap? Like, this thing sucks. It was like way broken. And he was like, here, come with me. And then he like took me to a guy, and he was like, this is the guy whose fault it is. You tell him. So it was a good time. So what I did, I went to Best Buy, or no, I went to GameStop, and I just bought, actually just gave them to me. I just got Wii remote straps, and they work. They're like way better.
Much better.
Yeah. So that's what I've been using.
Good to know. Thank you, Nintendo, for solving problems years ago that we didn't even know we had. So,
well, they knew they had it because the Wii remote, everybody was throwing Wii remotes into their TV, and they got so fed up with it that they like came up with a better strap, and they sent them out. I remember having the very first Wii. They sent me like a thing that was an email that said, if you give us your address, we'll send you free of charge 4 straps that are like newly improved. So please replace your current straps.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Man, you are, I want to hear, and the reason I wanted to get with you is really to dig into this, what you're doing with Love Clan and the hopes and desires doing church planting program through your church. And I honestly, I just really wanted to catch up and learn more about what you're doing kind of as you're trying to progress and build a digital church here. So as we're backing up, and some listeners may not remember, Jate was way back in the day, has already been on here early on, talking through what Love Clan is, but maybe just give a quick synopsis, minute or two. What is Love Clan? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Love Clan is essentially an online place for people to chat, and we have a Discord. That's where we do most of our ministry type stuff. It's grown into like starting to look into other stuff, but the basics of it is there's people out there that are looking for just something other than the cultural norm, which is I'm just trying to win in this game, or I want to, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the exact is. I don't know if I could put my finger on what's out there, but I just wanted something else than kind of toxic or whatever. That's kind of the front face of it, I guess. The front door into it, the lobby into the church, is kind of something we've talked about at one point. And then obviously the back end, the real goal is discipleship. So in the core team, that's our focus is in discipleship, and we have a prayer channel that's really active, and we think about next steps. What does it mean for people to join for the first time, just looking for something else? And then what does that mean if that person is willing to have a conversation with somebody who's a Christian? And if they're willing to have that conversation, then maybe they'd add something to the prayer channel. And if they'd add it for the prayer channel, would they be willing to have somebody reach out to them and ask them if they're okay? And if so, would they talk about maybe more in-depth things like spirituality and then even into gospel? And if so, then, and we just kind of think through that mindset from both directions, both people that are in our core team who are Christians learning how to be disciples, and then also how do we meet people where they're at already on the internet, and then what does that look like to kind of join those two things? And that's Love Clan. It's like in there somewhere. It's like a gaming chat, internet, whatever. Yeah.
So how long have you been doing Love Clan?
Oh, I should just know this off the top of my head, but it really feels more fluid because there's a whole story, where you start with, and we said this other one, but starting with another organization called Game Church, and then breaking off and doing our own separate thing. Then from there, I think it's been, 7, 8, 9, might be like 3 years.
Okay.
3 years, I think. I think 3 years as the name Love Clan. It may actually be way less than that. I don't. I have no idea. I honestly don't. It's 85 years, I think, and running strong. So
Wow, they had the internet
yeah,
85 years ago.
yeah, yeah,
That's impressive,
yeah. It's
man. You beat Al Gore to that. Well done.
sure. Yeah, we had the whole tin can with the string thing going for a while, but we've upgraded. So
The thing I love about what you're doing is that you've taken a discipleship kind of process towards this of training others to go, as opposed to
mm,
creating a walled off community, virtual community in this context where everybody comes in. And so the platform, a lot of it's funny, as I talk about you and I say the word Discord, actually a lot of people don't know Discord. Like if you're
oh
not a
yeah,
millennial and you don't play video games, I think Discord's not on the radar. So just
that's pretty true.
kind of like get some basics. What does Discord look like, and what does
Yeah.
the digital context of what you're doing actually look like in context of Discord?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Discord is, I'd say most people probably that don't know Discord know Slack, which is kind of funny. But Discord looks a lot like Slack if you open the two side by side, but Discord has a much more there's a lot more you can do with bots and with channels and setting it up so that it can run. If you don't know Slack, you probably know Skype. So there's a Skype element to it. There's video chat, voice chat, text channels. A lot of it is grouping people together into a space where they can chat, and then separating those chats into different chat channels, and having some of those chat channels be voice chat only channels, text chat only channels, or the ability to do video. And then you can add bots, which the bots help sort through, like if I was to say, yeah, I'm looking for this, that might trigger a keyword, and then it'll give a command that like lets people know, oh, it looks like you're looking for this. Here's where the channel you'd want to go to is for that. And so we can separate people into different games and so on and so forth. So to kind of help people find other people for what they're looking for. Yeah.
So over the past 2 or 3 years, you've been utilizing Discord as a platform to create a discipleship movement called Love Clan. Why are you going through a church planting training cohort? Like what's going on in your head right now?
This for me is a calling. I don't know exactly where that stops or like where that line is. I'm trying to understand what God's calling is. I know that it's to reach gamers. That's like first and foremost my calling. First and foremost for everybody, for a Christian, should be to make disciples and be a disciple. But my personal calling is doing that for gamers. I had a moment where I felt like God really opened it up for me and said that this is it. And I'd been praying for it for like 6 months with a group. And it was very short. I don't know if it was just a thought in my head. To me, it sounded like a different voice than what I was used to. So, but it was just, what about a game church? That for me was just like, oh gosh, that's so in line with passions, but even knowing who to reach and so on. And ever since then, it's been trying to figure out what does that mean, and it's fluctuated over the years. So I would say honestly, it's sort of like this. If it was something that was really already being done, or something that I could just point at and say, see how that person's doing it. I want to do it just like that. I would go and I would go to that person and I would ask them what they're doing, and I would follow that person. And then after, 6 months, then I would kind of start to do some of the same things. And, but like we've said, it's just not there. Like we're kind of, I don't want to say we're writing that, but we're figuring out what that looks like now. You don't, when you're doing something new, you don't just throw out what already exists, right? You want you want to take that and use it. And I think it'd be really foolish at 27 years old for me to think that I'm going to somehow be, I'm so smart because the internet. And so I can just forget anything else that's already been done ahead of whatever work we're trying to do. And instead it's the same idea you would do with any culture, where you would take what's working somewhere else and you apply it to a different context. Doesn't mean that the truth is different, or that the even the methods aren't necessarily applicable, but that there's a different spin to things, or in some cases a different language or a different, whatever. And that's how it feels with gamers. Like they have kind of a different language. Sometimes they have kind of a different spin to how they see things. And so how do we bring things to where people are, and change the context? We're reading through Acts. We see that where when they're in front of one group of people, maybe the way things are presented is one way. And then if they're in this other context, a different culture that doesn't understand, when there's he walks through and he sees all the idols in the town and stuff. And then he goes to I think Sanhedrin or whatever, but he's like, he goes in front of them and he's like, hey, there's here's how your town is, and like, let's talk about it. Do you want to know about the unknown God,
Mm-hmm.
and applying things that make sense in their context has been really big for me, especially thinking towards gamers. So that's kind of just to lay the groundworks of where my mind's at with all of this.
You're breaking a lot of paradigms and norms here. Like let's just spell this out. So first off, you're not in the physical space, you're in a digital space. So when you say gamer church, just out of clarity, you're not going to go rent a building over here and invite gamers in and do something. You're talking about doing this as on a virtual platform. True?
Not yet anyway. I mean, potentially, maybe, but yeah.
Starting out in the digital realm first, maybe physical. So already, the average pastor or the average church member in America defines ecclesia as the gathering in physical space. And so there's challenge isn't the right word. There's a rereading of what that could be. Even the fact that you are targeting an audience of gamers, as opposed to what the average person would do is target a physical location or something like that. I'm going to open a church in my community, and I'm going to call it Community Christian Church, and I'm going to invite everybody within 5 or 10 miles to that. You're more targeted towards a niche or an audience. Is it niche or niche? I never, whenever I say it, I feel awkward. You want to say niche?
I believe it's, but I think honestly, both pronunciations. Yeah.
So we're going to go with this. We're going to go with niche today. Well, very good. So niche, no T, niche.
Niche.
So you're targeting the niche of video. That just sounds so awkward.
Now it sounds weird. I don't know.
It does sound weird, doesn't it? You're going to target the very tiny group of video gamers compared to the grand scheme of things. So you're getting people who are similar in characteristics. Their shared value isn't they know where the closest Burger King is within the community, and they know how to time the stoplights. Their shared community, their shared value is centered around video games or VR or the new thing that's come out. It's that type of person that you're kind of reaching out to. What are the strengths and weaknesses? What are some things that you think that's better? And what do you think some things that you've struggled to kind of overcome with, maybe as you're reaching out with this different reading of how to do church?
This is something that I'm learning as we're going. That's difficult. I struggle calling something a church or not. I even with Love Clan, I don't want words to get in the way. I don't want it to with anybody with the Big C Church. I'm not purposely trying to start fights or anything like that. It's not like, I'll call this a church because I know it'll just really hit a chord with somebody, and then that whatever. And on the flip side, even in the group, the people that I'm discipling or that I'm ministering to, even they're like, a lot of them are turned off by the idea of church. Like they feel like it hasn't listened to some of the things they're trying to say, or that it didn't answer the questions that they had. And so they don't want it to be a church. Even the people in the core group, some of them are not, they're not really, they're like, well, show me what that means. Because where I came from, that wasn't something that was good. I wasn't in a good, healthy church. And I have to kind of look at it from both angles. And so that for us has been figuring out how do we define church. And I'm realizing that's not as easy as I thought it was. And I don't want to flippantly call something a church if it's not, for the same reason that we talk about, we just say the word like, well, the church says this, and obviously there's a bunch of churches, but when we say the church thinks this way, what we're saying is, things that have called themselves churches have said this way. And I don't want to do the same thing for ours if it's not what an actual church is, because who decides what a church is? It should be God. He decides if something is his church. He's going to build it. Jesus builds the church, rather than looking to what already exists and saying, are we that? And then we can call ourselves a church. Let's look to the Bible. And what does the Bible say a church is? And if it fits the criteria of what is this what Jesus is building? And does it fit in these things? Is it doing these things? Then we can call it a church. But if I talk to one person and they ask me, oh, is this a church? I'm not really interested in church. I'm going to have no problem telling that person like, well, I mean, what is your view of a church? And it's, well, it does this and this and that. And okay, well then maybe it is or it isn't based on the definition you've just given. But here's what it is, like this is a place where we're going to love you, and we're going to respect you. And there's a place that we would like you to get to where you can have a loving, respectful relationship with God. And how do we work there? We can do that together as a group. These are things that like I would expect from a church, but maybe that's not the wording he wants to use. So there's power in the words that we use. And the best list I've seen so far for what a healthy church is, speaking specifically about minimal ecclesiology, all of that. There's a book, Todd Wilson and Exponential, I think it's called Activating the Flywheel. And it's a free online PDF thing that you can download. And I want to make sure I'm right. I think it's chapter 6 is all on minimal ecclesiology, of like, this is the very basics of what a church is. They go through, Larry Walkemeyer worked for, well, when I first heard it, he had been working on it for a year, but I think he's worked on it longer since then, and since the publishing of that. But there's, I think there's 7 things that of this is what the minimum of a church is, and what a healthy church is. And so I read through that. You take everything at face value, because one person might say one thing or one person might say another thing, but you should still, there's always some truth in criticism, right? So you look through those 7 things, not meant as a criticism, but just as somebody that's trying to prayerfully consider what it means to be a church, and an effective church. And I don't want to just be the minimum a church can be, but what does it mean to be a really effective church? And looking through those, how do I apply those into my context? And even if I don't call myself a church, I would still want to make sure I'm doing these things.
Yeah, I'm sitting here on Google while you're talking. The Mobilization Flywheel by Todd Wilson.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So we'll put a link to it in the PDF,
perfect.
or in the show notes. So,
I believe it's chapter 6, but it may not be. And then, it's just like misquoting anything else.
Yeah.
You'll find it. Minimal ecclesiology. It's a really good chapter. The whole book's good, but yeah.
You're right. The church today, when people say the church, it means so many different things, but really it's different organizations' interpretation of scripture, and even that changes in context of um, locations within the country, locations within other countries, other
Sure.
continents. The church operates in Africa different than it does here in America, based on their interpretation of scripture. Because ultimately, and this is the
Mm.
one thing that I think is very easy to forget, we're all operating on different models of what we think church is.
Right.
Like the most popular model at this point is the more energy goes into the 1 hour on Sunday service than anything else.
Sure.
And honestly, whether you're a traditional service, a traditional church, or a modern church, contemporary modern Hispanic, there's a large Hispanic culture down here where I'm at in Miami. Different
Right.
cultures within that 1 hour on Sunday. It's pretty much musical worship, some form of announcements, and some form of long form teaching,
Yeah.
followed by more worship possibly. And at the end of the day, everybody goes home. Like
Yeah.
that's what the average person in America would define church as,
Hmm.
which is, I would say, a
As an
very good,
event, you know.
as an event. Yeah, sure.
I would say, yeah, as far as an hour on Sunday, that, we need to have a bumper after this thing, and that this is where we give communion, and like right after we pray, then that's where people's hearts are the most tender, and that's when we want to do the offering, like that, those kinds of thoughts. One thing I really appreciated about that book was that it didn't say like, well, one of the seven isn't you have a band with a 3-piece band with at least one drummer on rotation, and it's nothing like that. They're looking at the whys before the what, and what we're really describing is a what that might come from a good place. In the same way, when we think about discipleship strategies, people could just copy what you're doing and have it be the what. If they're not focused on the why first, of why am I doing this? Why am I discipling people? Then the what's pretty useless. And I think that's kind of one of the problems that's happened with churches. Local churches have a tendency, yes, to kind of copy what's already happening, and hoping out of doing the what really well that they'll find the why, that it kind of comes out of that. That's not a catch-all for sure. But if you don't know why we sing, and thinking about worship in that context, and what does it look like? What does it look like for why am I worshiping, or why is there spiritual authority in the church? Thinking through some of those things, and if you get to the core of it, that's what most of the New Testament is. Here is what Old Testament was. And now I want you to think about the why of why did I say these things are key? Why are these things laws? Why did I say not to do this? And people got so stuck on the what of it, that I'm going to just follow these rules. I'm going to follow it the right way, and I'm going to do all these things that I think of the example of, well, we're doing sacrifice, and he's like, it's become a stench to my, it's a stench to me now, because you're just doing it. You're doing the what, but you've completely lost the why of why I told you to do it in the first place. And I'm not going to say that local churches can have a tendency to become a stench. I think a lot of them have the right mindset, but if we're ever doing things just because it's the norm, or just because it's what we think is right, rather than prayerfully thinking about what our context is, and is there something else that God would want us to do, then yeah, that's a problem. That's not expecting Jesus to build a church. That's just us following what other people have built, and we're just doing a 2.0, and that's not good. That's not, yeah, I don't know. Well, I didn't really answer one of your questions earlier, so I'll pop on it real quick. But yeah, thinking in context of specific people rather than in a localization of people is, well, I made the joke earlier, but that I could, if I wanted to find a group of people that were Christian emos to go figure out what worship looks like with, that would be kind of difficult without the internet. And now with the internet, you can be more niche with the person that you're targeting. And I would say that while we kind of do that anyway, because like you said, Hispanic is really big in Florida. So how do we tailor the church service experience in that area? We're going to make sure that we're having some type of Hispanic influence. Maybe the worship, one of the songs is in, or most of the songs are in Spanish, and how do our events look like, and what are our small group communities, and what are the things we think through? Like, we do that just because it was local. We think about those things in the local context. But let's not forget that, like, the church is not the local physical location, but the body of believers. And so we're already always doing this. Like, it's just, rather than you being, I'm going to go to this location where this group of people are, now it's, I'm going to find these people from all over. They're already online, and this is my context, and so it doesn't really feel too different. It's just people, but I have things that I can relate that are maybe more specific than something. If you rather than giving a sports team analogy to a local sports team in the area, or about a specific event that happened locally, then you'd give an event that happened in the game, or you'd give it about a specific game, something like that. So it really isn't too different. I think it's just possible now, whereas maybe it wasn't fully possible before the internet.
Yeah, I mean, the internet definitely brought about more, I keep saying the word niche, more of that. It's one of the reasons, like, I honestly, and side note, you'll never have a band like the Beatles again. There will never be a single musical band to have that much influence. You kind of saw a little bit of it with U2, Coldplay maybe, but the musical genres are so subgenre at this point, thanks to the internet, that you're never going to be able to get that influence and that power. And so instead of reaching the world, we're reaching these individual, these smaller groups of people that we're able to have a much stronger influence, because you can fine tune your message to that. Message is the same, Christ, the method of communicating them to that,
Right.
like you guys are doing with Love Clan. So
and
go.
Not fast. I mean, or just really fast on that, but like, yeah, you do tune things to the message. Like, that's, why don't we copy and paste sermons from everybody else? Why aren't there just like the same, one person writes the same sermon and we do it at every church? Because the sermon is specific to the heart of the people that you're speaking to. The same way that, when he goes and he says to the unknown God, well, that sermon wouldn't have really flown in Jerusalem, because they would have been like, unknown God, like, we're Jews. we know who God is. So your sermons they should change. The message doesn't change, but like you're saying, there is a context of the people that you're speaking to, and your sermons should reflect that. So yeah, that's one of the things that's been really difficult for us lately, is, okay, what does it look like for Love Clan in the future? Because we currently don't have sermons. That's not our like primary thing, but there are some people that's the thing that they're going to want. And I do see a biblical precedent for some, for biblical teaching, at least rather than, right now we have a lot of biblical discussion, and we have small groups, things like that, where people can discuss. But I think as far as the specific spiritual authority teaching the word, presenting the message in a way that makes sense of their context, the same way Jesus did, the same way Paul does, I think that's something that's going to be a next step for us that we need to move more into. And getting the why right first. It's not just doing a sermon because that's what local churches do. We got to be the local, we got to be just like every other church. But if there is a need for biblical teaching, and I believe there is, then how do we present biblical teaching in the context of for gamers. And yeah, when I say it that way, that is what a sermon is it's presenting biblical context in the context of your congregation. My small group was the first one to start. We call it, Alpha 1, and it was just went through Acts. So
so Bible based, scripture based.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we use the 3/3. There's a thing called 3/3 method. You can Google it and it'll come up 3/3. It's from a book called T4T, training for, and I think it's training for teachers, something like that. But it's
training for trainers. But we'll
trainer for trainers. There you go.
Yeah. We'll include links on this. This is all very good.
Yeah. That's a really good resource. The whole thing, Ying and Grace Kai, both awesome people. And I've got to meet them in person. I'll just say T4T is an awesome resource, but 3/3 of that, the first half is kind of looking back at what God has done in the last week. So we'll use like pastoral care, worship, like thinking back, worshiping God for what he's done, worshiping, praying. So worship, right? In our context, usually with a small group, rather than singing, because it got difficult. I have done this once where I press play on a YouTube video and we just listen through it. And this is so funny because I'm realizing the last time I was on this podcast was like, oh man, a long time ago before we did our first small group. And I think I was saying we were going to do a small group or that we were thinking about doing one maybe.
You were just kicking the idea around.
Right. Okay. So cool. So this is kind of, look forward or whatever, but we ended up going with this model. And so we look back at worship. I will generally pull through a psalm or a verse that's just a praise of God. We'll read through that psalm and then pray through that psalm. So like if you haven't ever done this, it's actually a really cool extra thing I can throw in for another way for you to pray. But just read through a psalm and then pray in the context of that psalm. Like, yeah, God, like you are my rod and my staff, and you protect me, and you make a way for me to move forward even when I feel like I'm in the presence of enemies, and you lead me by still waters, that, and thinking through the verses the same way that David would have when he's writing them. It's like, I feel this way, God. I feel exactly how he feels at the first half of this, but I believe the second half. I believe that you can work through these things and that you do protect me. So anyway, worship in the first half of that, and the second half is in most of them it will say lesson, and I think that's good. If you can write a lesson, we're actually figuring out right now how to maybe do smaller groups, because smaller meaning shorter periods of time, because we have tried the extended long period of time groups currently, where it's just there's no end date. It's you just are in a small group, and that has worked for some of the people that started small groups in our group. I think there's also an easier in for some people to say this is a 7-week series, like a 7-week small group, and at the end of 7 weeks we'll disband. There's no beyond that if you don't want to, but then at that same time right after that we will start another group, and we'll go from there. What I like especially about that is that it gives us an opportunity for one to ask people very seriously to make this a priority, and that they have this many days. I want you to give me this day, this day, this day, this day, this day, and make that a priority for me. And at the same time, it gives us an opportunity at the end of that group to ask people that we feel like could lead a group, hey, you've been in this group. Would you, how are you feeling about this? Do you think you could lead one? And even if they say no, you've started that conversation, and maybe in the next group, they can be thinking about that. And then now you're, in 14 weeks, that person feels ready. Maybe even before that, maybe even halfway through that group, they're like, I feel like I could start leading this now, and
Mm-hmm.
it should never just be, so we were talking about starting a group, I think, in the last one. And then I started one. We then had, if you, Ralph Moore, we're just gonna point at everybody this time. It's great. Ralph Moore, man, I don't know which organization even to look up, but if you just look up Ralph Moore, you'll probably find him. Started tons of churches. He's the only level 5 church planner we could find when looking through Exponential. It's something, I'm not even gonna I'll just misquote how many hundreds of thousands of people, but it's a lot. And how many tens of thousands, or if not it's probably hundreds of thousands of churches at this point. But I went to one of his churches, one of the churches that was like a church of a church of a church of his in Japan when I went, because they knew him because they knew this guy who knew this guy. And they were like, oh yeah,
Wow.
like Ralph, like we know Ralph. So it's crazy the impact there. But his method for even thinking about small groups and in church planning and so on, it a lot of it starts with this awesome method of one person starts a group, and then from that that person identifies 3 people that are like the key leaders of that group. Usually that happens where you get some people that are just maybe a little bit more, they tend to do more of the work, or they just study more. They have a tendency to memorize more verses or so on. And from looking at that, then saying, okay, I'm going to take myself and maybe the third, if you think about like year 1 and then 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Like the 1 and the 3 will go together, stay together in the group that you're at now and continue leading this group. Whereas like the 2 and the 4 will break off and start a group. And thinking through that, then it ends up becoming like the 3 is now the second in the group, and the 2 becomes the 1 in the group, and the 4 becomes the 2 in that group, in the second group. Yeah. And so everybody is moving in a direction that's thinking higher up, and like, oh, I'm now in a higher level of leadership, and so I need to think about that moving forward, and I need to make sure other people are doing the same. So when now there's another group that starts, so
yeah, so that's a similar model of what you're trying to do through Love Clan to
that's our
empower
small
the
group
ones
model.
to find the 2, 3, 4s.
Yeah.
And then when they break off, that's either a separate channel in Discord, or is that where it gets into physical space?
So for this model right now, this is kind of what I'm using for our small groups. So for our community, we call them community groups, but or life groups is probably a better term, and churchy term. But we do that happened in my group where I had a 10 people and identified some people from there, and we split. We not even split. We had a couple people who were like leaders in the group, and said, okay, you 2 go and start a group, and we'll stay here, and we're gonna rebuild some stuff. And so they did. They started a group, and there was still somebody in our group who is now second, and everything kind of shifted again. And so when we started right after that, not too long after, that person who was second then started his group. So we have currently three community groups now, and they've all gone up and down, depends on the week and whatever, but they're all sitting at like basically max. There's 30 people in small groups now online, and we were all going through Acts. So I'm like in week 23. I think we do 1 chapter a week, and they're in like week 13 or something like that of
Gotcha.
Acts, because it's offset.
Sounds like you're due for one more for another split here in the next little bit.
Yeah. And we're gonna need, that's actually why we're trying to get to the end of Acts in my group, in the Alpha group, so that we can start trying the like 7-week thing. So our group will technically disband because and if anybody wants to rejoin, they can. Otherwise, we're going to then look for another group of people, and that gives people an off ramp if they're like, Acts was, too much. 28 weeks or whatever is like, that's too many weeks. So that's what that is. And that's the middle half. I was saying, like, lesson, rather than right now, we're not creating a lesson. It's a discussion. We're discussing through, if we're looking at 3/3, this is the second side, but we're doing discussion instead of lesson, and they're discussing through Acts. And then the last half being practice and prayer and goal setting, thinking the first half is looking back at what God's done. The middle half is looking up. What does God want to say through these verses? And then the last half, looking forward. What does God want to do? Goal setting for our group, practice for the future, making sure that people are trained so that, like last week we did, what's your story? Can you give a 2-minute testimony, And as leading the group, people kind of give me blank stares of like, I have to like think about a 2-minute testimony. And so I have to lead by example. If I don't have a 2-minute testimony, then I can't expect them to. So
right.
It's just a thing that you,
well, and that's all tied into T for T, or T for T is the 2-minute. And, I think they even have a 30-second version as well that's tied into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's where, from a biblical standpoint, you're going through Acts. From a discipleship standpoint, you're going through the T for T simultaneously. That gives you a foundation to allow for a discipleship system to be trained and taught.
Yeah, which is also biblical. Like it's all biblical, but it's the biblical is where I'm getting my why from. And then how, like, how do you do these things? In the current context is where a lot of that stuff, like T for T, and even like the activating the flywheel, thinking through and looking like, okay, what does this actually look like?
The current existence of church today in America is a model.
Right.
It's grounded on biblical truth, but it's a model.
Right.
500 years ago, it looked different. 1,500 years ago, it looked different. At the time of Acts, it looked different. And so a lot of times today, we're making adjustments to the model to do things in a church online component, or with what you're doing, a digital church, holistically digital model.
Right.
And it's received negatively because, oh no, that's not what church is. When in fact, even the way that we do church today isn't really like it's a model, it's an interpretation of what they see scripturally. The biggest challenges with church online is, hey, what are you going to do with the kids ministry? How are you going to do kids ministry online? Mm-hmm. And my response is, where do I see kids ministry in the Bible? Like that's not a Bible mandate that we have a separate children's church over here. You can make a very good argument for, hey, it's our job as a church to disciple the parents, to disciple the kids.
Why do people feel like there needs to be a children's ministry? And if it's grounded biblically, if it's because we're looking at stuff that says, that you bring them up in the way they should walk, and when they grow up, then they won't turn from it. And so therefore, how do I bring my kids up into this? And like you're saying, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean that the church is helping doing that thing, that they're helping raise the child, and that's usually in a church, what we'd say is, we're going to help you raise your child. And so those are good why questions. But if it's not from that perspective, if people aren't thinking that way, if they're just thinking, I want the same thing I had, they should think a little deeper, I think, is all. Like think about why you want those things. That's all. Yeah.
So let me ask this, and we'll probably wrap with this, but at what point are you done? At what point will you look out? Have you thought of this and say, Love Clan is the existence of a digital church when what is that?
Oh, right. Well, okay. Actually, this is unintentionally a great answer to a lot of the questions, because, you're asking, even from the very beginning, why would I go through a church planning training thing? and I don't know if we ever actually hit on that totally. We're bouncing around. It's okay. It's great. If I want to look at what currently exists, I'm not trying to go in blind. That I see so many dangers when you do things alone. So we want to look at what already has worked in the past with local, fully understand the context of what's out there. You know, if you're going to write a good book, you should probably read some really good books first. So that's what is, and this is one of the things that they point through all of this. Going through that, they'll talk about, right now we're talking about budget. I don't want to talk about budget. In my personal, I'm probably not thinking about budget, but they said, hey, I'm in church. This is what you need to think about. You need to think about a budget. You need to think about your value statements. You need to think about mission statements. You need to, you know, and if it wasn't for them basically telling me to think through those things, then I probably wouldn't. So I will stall and try to find my vision statement from, you know, that I wrote up in the cohort that I otherwise wouldn't have written up.
So basically, they made you write a vision statement.
They make you write all that stuff, yeah. And
you don't have a vision statement?
Well, I do, because I am in the cohort.
You wrote one.
Okay. Yeah, you know what I mean.
All right. So what's the vision statement? I want to hear this.
So they also told about the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. So our mission statement is that, right. There's a difference. So a mission statement is to help gamers find and follow Jesus.
Okay.
You know, and our vision, the big long-term, only possible with God, right, would be to have 1 million disciple making gamers. So
disciple making
gamers. Yeah.
That's good. Get to work.
You know, yeah. Right.
So, exactly. So you've got this mission vision, you've sat through the budget talk, although for pennies compared to what another church can do, you're doing, you know,
that is
Discord's free.
That's a whole nother conversation. But I don't want to even say that out loud. We're having a difficulty finding places to spend money. I mean, outside of like, you know, some salary or something that I would have more time for, especially as I'm moving into freelance, some stability to be able to write sermons would be nice. But yes, it is significantly cheaper and a large scale.
International church planning movements, they'll tell you money kills movement.
Right. Well, we're at 800 members and we haven't spent anything yet. We spent $5 to buy a color on a fake website. So that's
I'll cut you the check. I'll reimburse you there.
Great. I took it out of my personal, you know.
That's awesome. I love your heart, Jate, of how you're utilizing Discord to connect, meet, help create these disciples, and then unleash them in their local or virtual communities. That's a huge thing. So, man, thanks for jumping on the podcast with us and hanging out today. Man, any closing thoughts as we're landing the plane?
I'll just, if I can real quick, I'll try to do this as fast as possible. I'll just tell you a story of just something that just recently happened.
Do it.
So in our group, we had our core meeting on Saturday, and we were talking, I was explaining something that we do called step cuts. And it's the idea of like, everybody has a next step, but that you cut that step in half, and how do you make it an easier step for somebody? And then what does it look like to make it basically a ramp? It's just, this is the logical step for somebody to take. And there's a guy in our group named Zilly. And so I wanted to, I asked his permission if I could share this, but he shared his story basically. And for him, he was moving towards being reclusive, towards never hanging out with anybody. He was inside his room. And so it was, but he bought this game called Gary's Mod, and it was like $10, and it was a multiplayer. He didn't realize. And so then he was like, well, I guess I wasted $10, but we did game nights. And so he joined a game night. A friend invited him to the group, and then he did the game night, and then he started coming to all the other game nights and buying the games we were playing. And so it was like consistently playing. Then that friend invited him to do D&D in his house. And he was like, I never would have done that if it wasn't for having some relationship with people. So he went and did D&D at his house. Then his friend invited him to church, and he was like, okay, like that's sure, why not? So he
Mhm.
went to church. At the same time, he started coming to our community groups. Fast forward, it's been a while. He's at church, and he was in our community groups for a while. And all this stuff is going on. And so he's chatting, active in our group. Love the guy to death. And he's in our core group explaining like, this is kind of my progression. These are the next steps I've taken. And here's where I am today. And then he quickly had to go. He had to like jet out of our group. And we were like, okay, cool. Somebody else shared, and we moved on. That night at like 9:30, he sent us a photo, and it was of him being baptized. And he was like, I have wanted to make this decision for the last like 2-3 years, but it just never was the time. I was at my local church today. When I had to leave, I had to go to my local church where I have like another group, and it was talking about baptism. They said, if anybody wants to make this decision now, let's not wait. And I just said, it's time, And so he got baptized that night, and he has a fear of water, and he always has, where he's like, wading in water is actually really cool, but head underwater, he said being baptized might have doubled the number of times his head's been underwater.
Oh my gosh.
So actual very legitimate
Yeah.
fear of that. So so he's really taking lordship in very seriously in his life. That's what we want to figure out. How do we have this, where somebody who's in reclusive, people aren't going to be able to get to him. Where do we meet that person? And when we look in the Bible and we say, where are the people at? Jesus goes to where the people are. If those people are online, then we go online. I'm not going to be able to find that person if they're in a house they never leave. I got to go online to where that person is. And so that's why, that's what we're doing, is really just meeting people where they're at, which everybody says that. And so that's the reality, is that they're online. So I appreciate Zoe letting me share that. And I didn't want to leave without throwing it in there, because it's just such a cool story.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and I love your passion for people like that. I love your passion for that millennial, that Gen Z crowd. And you're kind of stuck in the middle right there of that group. I mean, these are your people. And the idea of using, I still, whenever I tell people about the video games, they're like, wait, you can disciple people through video games? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And
Usually
the
people say like, wait, we're still talking about online, right? That's I get that a lot. Yeah.
And I've always been enthralled with Love Clan and what you guys are doing, and am very much excited to see how God's going to continue to do things there through Discord with it. So if anybody's interested in getting in touch with you, we'll include the links in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I remember there was like was a URL to get connected with Love Clan. What was it?
Yeah. Loveclan.net. That's the easy join. Yep.
Cool. So check that out, loveclan.net. Check out and see what Jate's doing, how he's doing unconventional ministry, definitely unconventional, but at the core of it, discipleship and growing, even to the point of, researching and training and growing into a fully functioning church. So, hey, Jate, thanks for jumping on this with me. For
Always.
Jate, oh man, love it. For Jate, my name's Jeff, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye.
See you.